I'll be honest, I wasn't expecting too much going into this movie. The trailer had not intrigued so much as confused me and gave off weird A24 vibes. Much to my surprise though, the film completely overturned those expectations, with a coherent and riveting story, some incredible acting, and beautiful cinematography. Not only that, but its often subtle yet powerful scenes struck a chord with me on a deep spiritual level, which I did not see coming. You see, the movie hadn't made a single mention of God or the Bible, and it wasn't in the least bit preachy, and yet by the end of it, I was left wondering if I had in fact unintentionally watched a Christian movie. The film opens on some pretty soothing slice-of-life scenes as we watch Robin, a reclusive and rather scruffy truffle hunter, go about a slow and peaceful cottage life deep in the woods of Oregon with his beloved pig. They hunt truffles together, he cooks up rustic meals for the two of them, and she even sleeps by his bed. His only and rather one-sided human interactions are with Amir, a young upstart businessman who buys Robin's truffles to sell to high-end restaurants in the city. These idyllic scenes are rudely interrupted when some hooligans break into his house, knock him out, and snatch up his pig. He recruits a reluctant Amir to help find her, and off they go to the city. Amir later finds out that this forest-dwelling hermit is actually Robin Feld, a former famous chef who was big in the Oregon food scene before fading into oblivion after the passing of his wife. Using Robin's inside knowledge of the restaurant business, they're able to chase down leads until it is revealed that the despicable pignapper is none other than Amir's father, Darius, who is also in the business of supplying restaurants and is just an all-around ruthless, repulsive human being. I mean, what kind of father would sabotage his own son's business like that? So anyway, they pay him a visit, and Robin nicely asks for his pig back, but Darius refuses and threatens to turn his pig into bacon if he ever comes back and bothers him again. But Robin is determined that he can and will get his pig back. Contrary to our expectations though, he doesn't come back guns a-blazing or with some long and moving speech about how he can't live without his pig. But more on that later. I'm not giving away everything just yet. Now, I didn't watch this movie with any intention of taking away some sort of hidden deeper meaning, but the more I watched, the more I found myself unable to ignore the biblical themes that seemed to be popping up all over the place. I went online to see if any other movie reviewers were making similar observations and found just one. But it did point out something that had escaped my notice, that this was like a modern retelling of a famous story in the Old Testament. The story of a rich man, with all the sheep in the world, going out and stealing a poor man's one precious lamb, who he loved dearly and shared his food and bed with. So that's a pretty cool insight, but I'm about to take it a step further. You see, despite its slow pace, this movie contains plenty of surprises and twists, all of which stem from Robin. His words and actions upend our expectations of what a victimized character would do. He not only refrains from revenge and violence, but goes the extra mile to show grace and sincerity, often leaving the other characters in shock and awe. After watching several of these interactions play out, I couldn't shake the feeling that the way he acted and the effect he had on people really reminded me of someone in the Bible. Not just anyone, but the big man himself. Now, of course I don't mean to imply that Robin is literally the second coming of Christ, and I will eventually explain what I'm getting at. But first, let me just take you through all the parallels and similarities that caught my attention and, well, feel free to make of them what you will. Now, if you'll bear with me for just a minute, I want to do a little Sunday school throwback time. So everyone's probably heard of Jesus performing miracles like walking on water or turning water into wine. He had some miraculous qualities too, such as knowing everything about everyone he'd meet along the way, right down to their sins and secret sins. One of the most famous examples of this is his conversation with a woman fetching water from a well. Now, this woman was harboring what would have been a very shameful secret at the time. that she had had multiple husbands and was currently living with a man who she wasn't even married to. When Jesus reveals his knowledge of this dark secret of hers, she initially attempts to change the subject to hide her discomfort. But once she realizes who it is she's speaking to, she goes right back to her town and tells everyone all about what happened, evidently no longer concerned about upkeeping some fake image of respectability. More importantly, this encounter with Jesus showed her that whatever satisfaction she was getting from her current life was fleeting and ultimately left her empty, and that there was a better path leading to lasting fulfillment and satisfaction. So how does all this relate back to the movie? Well, Robin doesn't have psychic powers or anything like that, but he is something of genius, with the uncanny ability to remember every single interaction with every person he's ever cooked for or worked with. As a result, he's able to resurrect things about their past that they've been trying to repress for the sake of wealth and status. Amir and Robin's investigation eventually leads them to the swanky restaurant whose owner, Derek, had briefly worked for Robin back in the day. He is thrilled to see Chef Veld once again, but avoids disclosing any information on the whereabouts of his pig in order to protect his own business. Robin can tell right away that there is zero authenticity in these overpriced, soulless dishes and reminds Derek that his dream was actually to open a real English pub. Much like the woman at the well, Derek tries to hide his discomfort at being found out by deflecting attention to the restaurant's success and how much the people love it. But Robin points out that all the praise and popularity means nothing if they come from people who don't even see and appreciate the real him. And you can just see the look of "my entire life is a lie" wash over his face. So what these two encounters show is that both Jesus and Robin are able to see through people's carefully constructed facades to who they really are, and are gentle and empathetic in calling them out on the fact that they are basically wasting their lives on empty pursuits. They show a kind of tough love that encourages others to be honest with themselves and the world, so that they can improve and lead better, more fulfilled lives. As you can imagine, Derek, realizing the pointlessness of protecting a business he doesn't truly care for, reveals that it was Amir's father who took his pig. Turns out that Amir had gotten careless, perhaps even cocky, and let his untrustworthy father in on the secret of his truffle supplier. The stoic Robin finally cracks, and we see his first and only display of anger and aggression. However, he doesn't take it out on Amir's face, but instead on the fancy Camaro he's been driving them around in. It just so happens that the Bible also records only one instance of Jesus overtly expressing anger and aggression. That was when he came across merchants doing business in the temple courts, monetizing the most important Jewish festival of the year. Like Robin, he doesn't beat up the people themselves, but he does flip their tables and scatter their coins. Coins, just like the Camaro, symbolize wealth and ultimately human greed. So by taking their anger out on the objects of greed, Jesus and Robin express hatred not for the people who do wrong, but for the greed which drives them to make such choices in the first place. Amir offers to get him a new pig, which Robin of course has no interest in. He reveals to Amir that he actually doesn't even need his pig to find truffles, and yet still wants to find her simply because he loves her. So Robin doesn't even have much technical use for his pig, and yet to him, she is beloved and irreplaceable, and he's willing to do whatever it takes to get her back. If this sounds somewhat familiar, it's because it has parallels with that well-known story that Jesus once told about a shepherd with 100 sheep. One of them wanders off, and even though he still has 99 sheep left and could always breed new ones, he still goes off to find that one lost sheep, leaving the rest of the flock unattended and risking his entire livelihood just to get back that one sheep. As you can probably guess, that shepherd is Jesus, and every one of us is the lost sheep. This self-sacrificial nature is clearly demonstrated by Robin in the search for his lost pig, particularly in this one scene where he goes to this bizarre underground fight club for restaurant employees, which is run by Edgar, an old associate of his who holds the next clue to who has his pig. Right before this, Edgar had refused to help him, dismissing him as no longer relevant and not even worth his time. So Robin puts himself in the ring and, already weakened by the attackers who had stolen his pig, allows himself to be beaten to a bloody pulp, literally turning the other cheek, another one of Jesus' famous teachings. He endured all this pain just to get one step closer to finding his pig, and for me at least, this echoes how Jesus willingly submitted himself to the worst kinds of pain and suffering, as he was tortured and crucified by Roman soldiers, not saying or doing anything to defend himself. And he did all that in the hopes of saving us, his lost sheep, and to make a way to bring us back to himself. For this next point, we have to back up to when Amir finds out that Robin is the Robin Feld of culinary legend. He tells Robin that the only time he remembered his parents ever being happy was after a meal that Robin had cooked for them. It's also later revealed that Amir's mother is currently brain dead following a failed suicide attempt. This turns out to be the key to Robin's grand plan in getting his pig back. After his first unsuccessful attempt to persuade Darius, the two go about sourcing for not guns or explosives, but ingredients, and it dawns on us that Robin is going to cook for Darius. Not just any meal, but the exact meal he had served him and his wife all those years ago, recreating every single detail from memory. The meal achieves its intended effect, and the cold-hearted Darius is reduced to tears as the emotions and memories of that night come flooding back. So in this climactic scene, Robin clearly lives out the quintessential biblical principle of loving your enemies, which Jesus taught and epitomized throughout his life on earth. However, there is a verse from the Old Testament that gets even more specific, saying that if your enemy is hungry, you should feed him. While Jesus never said this exact quote, he was certainly in the habit of feeding the undeserving. He regularly ate with people that society regarded as sinners, and even invited the most notoriously corrupt individuals to have meals with him. Jesus personally prepared food too, sometimes for crowds of thousands, other times just for his disciples. At the Last Supper on the eve of his crucifixion, he shared this intimate Passover meal with them, knowing full well that Judas was about to betray him, and the rest would just abandon him to face the cross alone. Even after all these dismal events come to pass, following his resurrection, Jesus prepares yet another meal for his disciples, during which he reconciles with them. And so we see that in both the cases of Jesus and Robin, the preparation and sharing of a meal is a powerful act of service through which they graciously extend an olive branch and a chance at redemption to those who are far from deserving. So, you know how prophesying was among Jesus' many abilities? You might be thinking, sure, Robin may have that disheveled appearance of a prophet, but surely it's too great a leap to say that he is one. You may be right about that, but I would say he came close enough, for this analysis anyway. You see, the majority of Jesus' prophecies have to do with death and destruction. He predicts his own death, the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans, and worldwide catastrophes such as earthquakes and famines during the end of times. In a similar vein, when Amir confides in Robin about his mother's sad life cut short, contrasted with his father's immense success in business and staying power, Robin's reply comes out of left field. Almost trance-like, he talks about the impending destruction of Portland, which will soon be rocked by a devastating earthquake, followed by an apocalyptic tsunami, wiping out everything that's left. I don't know whether he got that from a scientific prediction or a farmer's almanac, or maybe he is actually psychic. But in any case, it's news to Amir. Now, all these doomsday revelations from Jesus and Robin seek to achieve more than just frightening their listeners. They're a wake-up call not to find our security in the glitzy things of this world which will soon be gone, and to ask ourselves if we're caring about what truly matters. One of the main goals of a Christian is to live like Christ. And while the film perhaps takes some artistic liberties, the parallels and similarities between Robin and Jesus serves as a really effective reminder of what this looks like in practice. Sacrificing for our loved ones, being gracious and forgiving to those who hurt us, all while expecting nothing good to come to us in return, because as long as we're on this earth, there will be pain, suffering, and injustice. Sadly, this plays out in Robin's story too. We don't get the happy reunion we're hoping for, as Darius regretfully tells him that the pig was handled too roughly by its captors and passed away. Sometimes, like Robin in these final scenes, and like Jesus on the cross, we'll have to deal with real loss and grief and loneliness. And in such moments, all we can do is look heavenward.